Good evening to you. Are you in London at the moment or at your home in Barbados? Sir Cliff Richard.
Hi, Bob. No, I'm actually in England. I have been in Barbados, but I came back because since the single and the new DVD are being released, both on the same day, like this Monday, yesterday, I've got about 3 weeks of interviews. Now, counting up the interviews, including the one I'm doing with you now, there's going to be about 90 different radio and TV things that I have to do in 2.5 weeks.
Serves you right. Serves you right for being so successful.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Now, I want to talk to you about your CD, which I think is quite wonderful, but you mentioned a DVD, and that was done, what, here at the Opera House?
Yes, it was. We came over, rehearsed in Australia, in Sydney. Then we went to New Zealand and did 3 concerts there. And it was good because we had a chance to really settle the show in. We began to feel comfortable with it. We came back, did another couple of shows in the city, and then went out to the Opera House and filmed the thing actually at the Opera House, which is a great venue to do something like that.
It is indeed. Well, now let's talk about the album, the Fabulous Rock and Roll Songbook, released this week. I've had a few special items from it that I've been playing in advance, and I must say I love it because that was the era that I was loving too, the early days of rock and roll. But I have one complaint. Your first hit was really, you wanted to be Elvis Presley, and it was called Move It. I would have thought perhaps you would have put a new version of it on the album.
Well, the thing is, I've recorded it a number of times, re-recorded it with the Shadows and done it myself live with the band and everything. So, and the fact the band when I went to Nashville, the band kept saying, "Are we going to do Move It?" So I thought to myself, well, I'd leave it off for now, and if we do a volume 2, we can go back and see what else we can do with it.
Now, is it? I suppose I can't ask you. Do you have a favourite track of the 13 songs you do? Little Richard's...
Well, they're all my favorites. These are the songs, every one of them. As you say, we're from the same genre, and it's how I learned how to do what I do. These are the songs that I listened to when I was at school. I saved up my pocket money to buy the Elvis first album. I ran around borrowing anybody's records I could find, Little Richard and people. And so when I chose them, they actually were all, for me, they're some of the best songs I've ever heard. So it's hard for me to pick a favorite, but I guess the one that I thought came out the best for me, because I expected nothing from it, Johnny Ray had a big hit, I think a worldwide hit, with
Such a Night.
Such a Night.
Yes.
And Elvis did it a few years later, and I thought, well, I'd love to try it. And when we first did it, actually, it sounded a bit retro, and I'm not quite sure what we did. We certainly slowed the tempo down and kind of halved the riff, and I was really happy with the way it sounded. It sounded different. And I thought to myself, if I was going to choose a first single, I might have chosen that one, because to a lot of people, they would never even have heard of Johnny Ray. And therefore, it could have come across as almost a new song. So I liked that a great deal. But look, the Brian Hyland song, Sealed with a Kiss, that was a dream to sing. It's just... it was just fantastic. Or each one of them. Johnny B. Good as well. Look, I don't know of a single rock and roll band that didn't do Johnny B. Good on their stage show, as amateurs and as professionals. It's just, it had to be on there. And again, it was just great to sing it, to actually feel myself doing what Chuck Berry had inspired me to do.
And Chuck Berry's still alive, of course. But let me just tell you this.
He is. He still tours around the world.
Wonderful. But let me tell you this. When I saw Fabulous, I thought, I remember the name, but I can't remember who did it. And I think it is fabulous. And the fellow was a fellow called Charlie Gracie.
Yes, it was. I met him actually once in London some years ago, and we talked about that. He actually had a good writing spell, because Fabulous, I think, reached about number 8 or 6 in the British charts. But he had 2 other songs, and I think Andy Williams had a big hit with Butterfly,
yes,
he wrote. And then there was another song called Wandering Eyes, which Charlie wrote as well. And when I was in Florida recently, he phoned me, and he had a radio show on Sunday mornings in Philadelphia. So he heard that I was recording his song, and so I talked to him about it. We had a great time. He was a very, very nice and very committed rock and roller.
Lovely. But there's one song I can't trace. One More Sunny Day. Who was that a hit for?
Oh, now, One More Sunny Day is not an old rock and roll song. The record company wanted me to do one song like a bonus track, and they wanted it to be a brand new song. fortunately for me, my producer, Steve Mandel, has a co-writer friend, and they wrote One More Sunny Day for me for the album. And I'm still not quite sure why they wanted that on the album, but I must say, if we'd been recording 20 years ago, I think that could easily have been a contemporary single of mine. It's a very catchy little song and a nice lyric.
I'm glad I got that right. I suggested it might have been a new song right at the end. Now, let me also ask you this. You were knighted how many years ago you became Sir Cliff?
I think it was in 1995.
Is it right that David Beckham, I hear, might be getting a knighthood? Have you heard that?
No, I haven't. But there again, if it was on the cards for him to get one, he would not be allowed to speak about it to anybody until after the event, or until after it's officially announced that he has it.
Yeah, well,
so he could well. He's done a lot for our country in terms of football, and certainly been a great ambassador in the States for us, and is still earning top dollar over there.
One more question. You were born in India. You don't seem to have done any performances through India. Is that right, or am I wrong?
No, I did a gospel concert. I went there once some years ago, right in the sort of late 70s. And I took my band over and we did a concert there. It was absolutely phenomenal. It was not a huge venue, but they are now talking about possibly me doing something in the spring of 2015 in India. A couple of massive great venues. Apparently, I still have a big following there. Certainly lots of people that know me because it was always written up. Every article I ever had in those days said that I was born in India, and Indians became quite proud of me as part of the family almost, even though I'm not Indian. But I certainly lived my childhood there. My father and mother were born there, so I have still got a strong connection with the place. And so I hope it comes off. I really do. I've been dying to go there for years, but there's always been the problem, Bob, of all those years ago when I first started, they didn't have the equipment we needed. They were not high-tech at all. And so nowadays it seems to me that everybody has almost everything that we need. So we don't have to carry things across there. They'll have it already for us. So I'm looking forward to that. And if it does happen, it'll be in the spring of 2015.
Now, we mentioned
just talking. I got my fingers tightly crossed.
We mentioned your Opera House concert that's being released on DVD.
Yep.
Are there any? I mean, you have an incredible following here. Whenever I mention Cliff Richard, I get reaction from so many of your fans. Is there any talk of another trip here?
Oh, we always think of another trip, but the world is not as small as people make out. We started the show with you in Australia in January, and then we took it to Singapore and Manila. Then we did it in Britain, and in between, by the way, between doing the Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand, I then went to Nashville for a couple of weeks and made the album. Then I came back and did the concert in London, in England, and now it's promoting time. And of course, I have to do it in Europe next year. They want the same show in Europe. So in May and a bit of June, I'm going to be in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, and France. So I don't know when we'll get a chance to come back, but as soon as we can, we'll be there.
You're 73. It's time you slowed down, but I think you have a soft spot for Australia because one of your first managers was a Sydney boy called Peter Gormley.
Oh yeah, did you know Peter?
Very well. I knew him when he was leaving for England with Frank Ifield.
With Frank Ifield, that's right. He came over and he managed the Shadows, and I had another manager at the time, but my contract was running out. And Peter, Peter, he was absolutely straight-laced, die-hard, honest man. And when I asked him to manage me, he said, "Look, I can't do that because you have a manager." I said, okay. And in fact, when it came to re-sign with my other manager, I just didn't re-sign. And then I came to him, and he signed me happily. And Bob, I don't know that this happens very often in our business. The first year, Peter did not take any money. He didn't accept any money. And I kept saying, but you should be taking your percentage. He said, look, whatever you're doing now is probably because what the other guy did. So I won't take any of it. And how often do you hear that? Peter Gormley will always remain in the shadows and my minds and memories as being one of the most startlingly wonderful men you could ever hope to meet.
Lovely story. And I should also just add as we conclude our interview that I was sitting in his office at Savile Row in London waiting to speak to him when in walked Olivia Newton-John. And that started a friendship for you too, didn't it?
It did. Of course, Peter took over management for Olivia. She and Pat Farrer from Melbourne. Pat later married Olivia's producer and the guy that wrote most of her big hits, John Farrar.
Yes.
Farrer. And when they first came over, Peter was managing Olivia and Pat, and Pat and Olivia became my backing vocal group for about a year and a half.
Wonderful stories.
So we got to know each other real well, and then she made her record, and I was doing a TV series of 13 shows. I got her on the show. She came to do one show. Bob, the camera loved her, the cameramen loved her, the audience loved her, and she stayed for 8 weeks. I couldn't get rid of her.
Well, she's still around, and there's been a huge success in America. It's time to go. I shall play, well, I think we'll play Such a Night, because that's the one you mentioned.
Okay.
But please come back soon.
Oh, Bob, it'll be a pleasure. My band always tells me that if you can't afford to take us, we'll come for free. We love it there.
Sir Cliff, wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, Bob, so much. Bye-bye.